Hi all, it's Michelle from Cozyegg, and today is Thursday, January 15th, 2026, and this is episode 159. So here we are in 2026, and this is January marks the 11th year of my floss tubes. I started doing floss tube. I recorded my first one January 25th, 2015. So this is my 11-year floss tube anniversary, which seems really crazy. But here we are. So for all of you that are new here, welcome. And for all of you that are returning viewers, I really appreciate having you here. And it's crazy to me that I've been doing this for 11 years. So I started blogging back in 2006, I think. And then in 2015 started my Flosstube channel, and here we are. So it is also whip parade season. So not only is it the new year, not only is it my Flosstube anniversary, but it is whip parade season. I am going to be showing you some whips. I am not going to be showing you all of my whips because, yeah, that's a lot. So, but I have notes in front of me because I have like a million things to talk to you about. And after I recorded my last video in December, after I finished recording, I was like, oh yeah, I was going to talk about this and this and this, and I totally forgot. I may still forget even with my notes, but we're gonna see how it goes. So settle in, and we're just gonna run with it. So obviously the last time I talked to you was prior to Christmas. I think I recorded like right after the solstice. So we had a very lovely Christmas. Eric makes, we do a big Christmas Eve dinner. And so Eric made that. We had our family over, and it was lovely, you know, but it's a mini course meal, and we're usually at the table for like what seems like 11 and a half hours or something, but it was delicious. And then on Christmas Day, we went over to my in-laws' house and had Christmas Day dinner over there, which was lovely. And on Christmas morning, Eric always makes apple pancakes, which I love, and which you probably saw a video clip of. They're delicious. So we always do that like on Thanksgiving morning and on Christmas morning. And then on New Year's Eve, we just ordered dinner and had a nice dinner delivered. We just kind of hung out, and I stitched, and we watched New Year's Eve specials. And on New Year's Day, we made cinnamon rolls, which is kind of our tradition. And then we made strufoli, which are basically like little dough balls that you then cover in this honey concoction, basically, and then put nonpareils over. And so we made that. We've been doing that 2 or 3 years maybe on New Year's. So did that, and then went over to my in-laws for New Year's Day dinner and had lasagna, which is our also kind of Eric and my tradition for New Year's Day. So it was quiet. It was, you know, lots of good food and cozy you know, the whole thing. One of the things that I did do over Yuletide, and there's various descriptions of what we may want to refer to as Yuletide, but for me, it's basically the period between the solstice and January 1st. And so one of the things that I did was basically what you do is for the 12 days of Yuletide, you write down 12 intentions for the new year. And then on each day, starting with the solstice, you basically put these on little strips of paper, and then on each night, you burn one of them. Like you fold them up so you don't know what's what. You burn one of them. And basically that is a way of kind of releasing that to the universe to take care of for you. And then on the last day, which is January 1st, you unfold the last one, and that is yours to carry into the new year for you to handle. That is your intention for the year. And so the one that I ended up with on New Year's Day basically was to be intentional with my time and my energy, which, you know, is kind of my intention all of the time, but it's a good reminder because that gets away from me. So that is the intention that I was set with for the new year, is to be intentional with my time and my energy. So that's what we're doing. But it was a good way to kind of, you know, between the solstice and the new year, kind of, you know, be very intentional about, you know, what I wanted to carry into 2026 and beyond. So yeah, so that's one of the little things that I did. And I think I may have had a little clip of me, you know, burning one of my papers, which I kind of struggled with because it was super windy outside. And so my papers kept going out. I had to keep relighting them, but that's the way that goes. Okay. And of course, Ramses has come to assist with Flosstube, as we do. So, yeah, here we are. And I did just do my nails. This is a Mooncat polish called 404 Soul Not Found. And this was my first time using a magnetic polish. I don't know that I was super effective with it, but I really like the way that it turned out. And it looks totally different in different lights. Under these lights, it looks kind of purple and green, which is sort of my favorite iteration of it. In other lights, it looks sort of blue and purple. But it's really cool. I love it. There was one of my favorite polishes that I've ever had was by an independent company called Crow's Toes. And she did basically like a Viking sort of inspired polish collection that I had a couple of colors from. And one of them was Hugin and Munin, which are the two ravens. And it shifted from like purple to green, and it was kind of oil slick looking. And that polish is long dried up, unfortunately, and I've never been able to find a replacement for it. This is about the closest thing I've ever been able to find. So, ice maker. So I love this. It's good. Okay. So in this video, I thought I would, like I said, I'm going to do kind of a mini whip parade, and I'll explain more about what specifically I pulled out, as well as I wanted to do kind of a little recap of 2025 and go through, you know, kind of all of that good stuff, and then a little bit about my plans. So I've also been feeling rather nostalgic lately, so I may sort of ramble on and wax poetic about that as well. But we're just gonna jump into it. So 2025, yeah, 2025 was a lot, wasn't it? In February, you know, Eric was in the hospital. In March, we lost Tut. I lost my job. Then I got a new job. So there was kind of a lot of that kind of stuff that was going on in 2025. We did celebrate our 19-year anniversary, which I'm very grateful for. And I released 3 designs. I released my second tombstone design called A Poet's Heart. I released my reproduction sampler, Summer's Last Crown, and then also the Belladonna planchette, which I released in November. So releasing 3 designs, I'm pleased with that, especially since one of them was a big one. And the other cool thing that happened was that the attic asked to, wanted to carry all 3 of my reproduction sampler charts in physical charts. So sent those off to them, and I was really, really thrilled to be able to do that. That felt kind of big. So, what else? Okay, so kind of a stitching overview of 2025. I had 14 finishes, which I've had some years where I've had a good bit more than that. I've had some years where I've had a lot less than that. In fact, I think 2024, I only had like 7 or 9 finishes or something, but 14 I'm quite pleased with. 4 of those were long-term whips. And by long-term, I mean like over 10 years. So one of those was my 6 Wives of Henry VIII by the Primitive Hair. One was my Dracula book cover. One of them was the Halloween Fairy that I finished in during Dark October stitching. And then the last one I'm going to show you here in a minute because I finished it right at the end of the year. So I also had 6 FFOs that I did, including framing 2 things that have been finished for a while. One of those was tombstone spots, and one of them I'm going to show you here in a minute because it was kind of like, I think I framed it on like December 30th or something. So it was sort of a last minute, got this done. And then I had 8 new starts last year, and 7 of those I finished, most of which were smalls. But hey, 8 starts and I finished 7 of them. That's a pretty good deal. I will show you the one that did not get finished. So, and yeah, so that's kind of my recap of my stitching year. I didn't really do any other crafting to speak of. I did have that one quilt quilted, and I still need to put the binding on it and the label on it and all that and get it finished up. But I didn't really do any other crafting to speak of. I did a little bit of EPP, English paper piecing, but nothing to write home about. So primarily it was just stitching and reading and charting and model stitching and all of that. So yeah. Let's see. So I thought I would talk a little bit about, I sort of touched on this in my last video, that I'm starting to do cyclic planning. And so I've sort of divided up my year into quarters. And so the winter quarter basically started on the solstice and is going to go until the spring equinox. And so I set myself a series of goals, as well as kind of planned out what whips I want to work on, that sort of thing. So I'm just sort of kind of working a season at a time, which feels much more doable to me. It lets me be a little, kind of narrow my focus a little bit. And also it helps me to stay kind of in that seasonal mindset. So, which helps me be more present, really, is what the goal is to be more present so that I can be more intentional with my time and my energy, right? So when I sat down and I looked at my winter quarter goals and kind of doing that Change Your Life challenge that I think I talked about a little bit as well, I wanted to look at things that I thought would have a good amount of impact. And so one of the things that I wanted to do is work on some decluttering and organization around the house. And winter is not necessarily a time for big, deep cleaning kind of thing, but it's definitely a good time for, kind of clearing things out and decluttering and, that sort of thing. So I thought it would be a good time to do that, and kind of starting it when I was off work would be a good thing. So there is a woman that has a website as well as an Instagram, A Bowl Full of Lemons, and she also has a Facebook group. And I've been in this Facebook group for several years now, and there's a lot of home organization and cleaning and, stuff like that kind of stuff that goes on in there. And so every January she does this home organization challenge, and she basically, it's like a 13-week challenge, and she basically has you go through, each area in your home. And so it's like 1 week you do the kitchen, 1 week you do the laundry room, 1 week you do the main bedroom, etc. And you go through, and she has like a specific list of things for you to do, like to declutter, to things to look at, looking at things like expired medications and, clothes that you don't wear and whatever. And I've attempted to do this the past few years, and I don't really get anywhere. And so this year I thought, you know what, this is the perfect time for me to actually kind of focus on this and try to, get some things done. And while I didn't want to do, like I said, I didn't want to do like a huge, like declutter, deep clean kind of massive thing, I did want to at least spend time in the main areas and try to make some progress with getting rid of things, going through some things, trying to hit some specific targets. And so basically what I did was I looked at, the 13 areas that she has. And I think one of the areas is the garage. And Eric's actually been doing the decluttering on the garage. So I just cut that off my list so that I could do it in the 12 weeks of this cycle or this quarter. And so that worked out for me. And so I also kind of looked at, while I have the Christmas decorations up, that sort of thing, what areas do I need to avoid? What areas would it make more sense to work in instead, that sort of thing. And so I did a little bit of rearranging of the schedule. to kind of fit my schedule, which that's what it's all about, right? So I basically started in the office and was working on doing some decluttering and some scanning and shredding and all that sort of thing. And then the next week was basically kind of your crafts and hobbies. And so over the holidays, like while I was home and had kind of a good chunk of time, one of the things that I did was I went through my whip buckets. I have two like big tubs, like those big kind of Rubbermaid containers where I keep all of my project bags with my whips in it. And so I wanted to go through those and figure out what the heck is in here. And I wanted to sort of reassess everything, as well as I wanted to, anything that I knew I wasn't going to touch anytime soon, I wanted to pull the threads out of and just put them back in inventory, because I get so tired of wanting to work on something, realize I've stolen the threads into something else, and then I have to go dig for the something else, that kind of stuff. The other thing is that I have, the way that I had it organized was one of the buckets was sampler whips, and then the other one was non-sampler whips. So more like seasonal type things. Like that's where all my Halloween stuff was, whatever. And what I have been finding is that I think Red Velvet said it in her Whip Parade video. She said, I'm not really in my sampler era right now. And I agree with that. I'm not really in my sampler era right now. So I haven't been really interested in working on samplers. I've been much more interested in working on seasonal things or kind of non-sampler things. And my sampler bucket is on top, and then the other bucket was on the bottom. And I was like, okay, at the very least, I think I need to swap these because all of my crafting stuff is in a very small closet. And so to get anything in or out is kind of an ordeal. So I wanted to try to make things easier for myself, easier to access, not have threads kind of spread throughout things. I wanted to reassess my whips, all that good stuff. And so what I ended up doing is I went through every single project bag. I made sure that I knew what was in which project bag, and if I left the threads in it, what threads were in there so that I know. And I kind of took a hard look at, is this something that I think that I'm going to want to work on anytime in the near future or not? And so instead of having things divided up between my sampler bucket and non-sampler bucket, I organized into, is it something I want to work on or not? And hopefully that will allow me to be able to access the things that I want to work on more easily, and the things that I don't want to work on, I don't need to get to, so it's fine being in the bottom bucket. But it also helped me kind of look at, does this even need to be a whip anymore? Like, do I still love it? Do I even want to continue on with this? Can I get rid of it as a whip? That sort of thing. So I did have a few things that I just marked off the list, and that felt really good. And I had a lot of things that I pulled threads out of, which also felt really good. And I did find in there things that were kitted but not started, and it's like, why is this even in here? It doesn't need to be in here. It needs to be in my kitted bucket. So I pulled that stuff out too, because yeah. And then I had like some, like wool felt for finishing, and I must have just been stuffing things in there at some point because it didn't make any sense. So it felt really good to go through those things. And like I said, I am hoping that, one, it makes things more easily accessible for me. And two, it helps me kind of narrow my focus. Because instead of saying, you know, I have 50 some odd whips and feeling super overwhelmed by that, I'm really only focused on a small number of whips. And those are the only ones I care about, because the other ones were just not even, they don't even exist right now. So that really helped. And over Thanksgiving, I had also done some work in my craft closet to do some organizing. I have one of those rolling carts that was not usable, in the sense that I had stuff on the rolling cart, but none of it was stuff that I really needed to like get to or use. Whereas the stuff that I was in and out of a lot wasn't on that rolling cart, which sort of sits at the front of the closet. So I'm like, I need to make this more, you know, I need to put on here the things that I need to get to regularly, like my sewing bag that I use like for mending or whatever, my sewing threads that I also use for mending, my jewelry tools, you know, that I use for repairing jewelry, like things like that. These are the things that I need to be able to get to that don't need to be buried in the back of the closet. And then other things like my Ziploc bag full of Ziploc bags did not need to be there. So, yeah. And I also found a place near me that takes craft donations. And they do have a resale shop, as well as they do donate some of the items to some of the local women's shelters, and some of the kind of longer term shelter's not the right word, but I'm not coming up with, you know what I mean. Anyway. And so I took a bunch of stuff to be donated. I have another pile of stuff that I'm also going to donate. And so I had sort of started this process back at Thanksgiving. And so then over Christmas, New Year's, like I said, I went through my whip bucket and tried to kind of organize and figure out what the heck do I have in here, and let's narrow the focus. So that really helped me. But anyway, so that's kind of the sort of things that I'm doing as part of this home organization challenge. Is I'm not going through everything. I am trying to do sort of targeted decluttering, going through things, organizing things, because ultimately my goal is to get rid of as much as I can, so that I have less to organize, but also so that the things that I have are accessible, because if it's not accessible, I won't use it. So, one of the other things that I'm working on as part of my goals is setting up a cleaning routine, because I am crap at cleaning and I can't ever remember when I did something last or when it needs to be done again or whatever. And I'm not talking about kind of the weekly, like mopping, vacuuming, laundry, blah, blah, whatever. I'm talking about other stuff. The stuff that isn't, quite as, that isn't quite weekly. Some of the deep cleaning type things, whatever. And so I'm trying to work on setting up a cleaning routine for myself that makes sense, kind of based on the seasons. And like I said, winter is not the time for deep cleaning. And really neither is summer because it's Texas and it's hot. So I'm trying to kind of, you know, come up with ideas for that and start to institute some routines for myself, as well as some daily habits to help kind of support what I'm trying to do. And I want to get to a place where I feel like, you know, things just come naturally and I'm not having to sort of fight and force myself. And I'm also not having to rely on remembering things, that they just become day-to-day routines. And because my brain there's too much stuff in there. So it is hard for me to remember things. Even with writing them down, sometimes it is also hard for me to get up enough energy to even want to do anything at the end of the day. So, so those are some of the things that I'm working on. And then the last piece is I am trying to go back and do some backfilling in my journal for days that I have missed, because that's important to me. And so I, you know, took an inventory of what was missing, and I'm starting to kind of work through filling that stuff in, which is a big deal for me. That's kind of my personal project. So I tried to come up with goals that I thought would help me long-term and make my life easier long-term, as well as, you know, have a personal project, something that, you know, is a longer-term thing that I can break up over the 12 weeks into smaller bite-sized chunks and work on that. So that's what we're doing. And it's going okay-ish. The beginning of the year is a little, so we're working on it though. Yeah, so I'm gonna just kind of jump right into, let's actually talk some stitching. I know I've been sort of rambling for about 30 minutes, but let's talk some stitching, shall we? Right in time, Ramses is back. So, hello. Thank you for joining me. Okay, so let's look at what I've worked on. And I have a whole huge pile here that I'm gonna have to kind of sift through. I also did make some changes to my lights, which hopefully help with the shadows from my glasses a little bit. It's not perfect, but I feel like it's better. Okay, so at the end of the year, I was working on Jenny Bean's Christmas Sampler by Shakespeare's Peddler. This is it. And I started this, I probably should have looked. Let's see if I wrote it down. No, I didn't write it down. I don't know when I started this, but I've probably had this going for about 10 years now. And I love this. So Jenny Bean's Halloween Sampler is probably one of my favorite things that I've stitched ever. It was just one of those things that I loved the design, but I also enjoyed stitching it so much. And so when this piece came out, I absolutely loved it. And the verse says, "And had I but 1 penny, thou shouldst have it to buy gingerbread." I love the little house. I love everything about this, the colors, etc. So when this came out, I kitted it up. I stitched on the called for 40 count vintage navy bean by Lakeside back in the days when you could get Lakeside easily. And I stitched it with the called for Gentle Arts sampler threads. So here's the thing with this. I started this I want to say not too long after my dad died. And things with my family were not in a good place. And I remember starting this, I think I started it like on Thanksgiving Day, maybe like 2013 or something. And it was an attempt to do something joyful and to, bring some peace and calming and some joy to my life when things were really not good. And unfortunately, I think I worked on this like a good bit, sort of through that season and then put it away. And unfortunately, what happens sometimes is, then every time you pick that piece up, it brings back all of those memories. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's not. And so I think part of my issue with working on this piece and why it has been a whip for so long is that every time I picked it up, I remembered all of that stuff. And even if I wasn't, like now, I couldn't even tell you specifically what was going on at that time, but I have an overall sense of sort of what was going on, and it was awful. So every time I picked this piece up, that's all I could think of. And so this year, when it came time to do Christmas stitching, I may have mentioned that I didn't do any Christmas stitching like the last 2 years because I was stitching models. And so finally having the ability to do some Christmas stitching, I was really excited about it. And it was kind of a risk to pick this piece up because it could have gone totally sideways, but I did it anyway. And I'm really glad that I did, because I feel like it allowed me to put some good memories in it and to actually get it finished. So I did make some adjustments, which I will show you, but here is my finish. And I just have the fabric folded over. So, but this is my finish. And so one of the things, when I picked this up, immediately I was like, okay, now I remember why I don't like working on this. The chart is a challenge to read. It is not easy to read. And therefore difficult to stitch from. The other problem that I found was that I had gotten off somewhere, and so like my house and all this stuff to this side of the house was fine, but everything on this side of the house, like the ABC, A, B, C, D, E, was off by a thread. And of course, like I counted down to do, these leaves and everything. And so like that, it's all off by a thread, but whatever, we persevered. So, when I picked this up, I basically had like the center section with the house and everything done and the lettering. And I had basically all of these leaves down here to this little star. So I did all the leaves going up. I did all of the words, the borders, this diamond band, and then the rest of the alphabet here. So what did I change? Basically, two things. One is, on the original chart, the 1824 is actually in a filled in white box. I didn't feel like that really added anything, so I left that off and just stitched the 1824 without doing all the fill in behind it. I just left that off. And then the other thing that I left off was down at the bottom, it says Rut Gladly by Jenny Bean. I left that off too. I kind of felt like my Halloween sampler says Jenny Bean on it. I didn't really need this one too. It's an original sampler, so I didn't really care. And then you'll notice there is a border that goes all the way around the outside. And I have heard from people that makes framing so much harder when you've got a border all the way around your piece like that, like just a one stitch straight line border. So I just left it off. I stitched the other borders, but I left off that outside border, and I think it's fine. So I really love this. I love, love, love the colors in it with those sort of berry colors and this sort of frosted raspberry color. The greens, I love it. Oh, and I did change the color for the lettering because the color that it called for, mine was really variegated and it went really light and it was really hard on the lettering. So I just went with something that was more kind of even toned but had the same kind of color to it. So really, really happy with this. I'm happy to have it finished. I'm happy to have had some good memories associated with it, and really glad to have that done. So I finished that the day after Christmas. And then once I finished that, I picked up another long-term whip, which was my Christmas celebration sampler by the Frosted Pumpkin Stitchery. And I just have a black and white cutout, or printout. So that's it. It was originally released as a mystery sampler. They have a Halloween one too. So basically each block has a letter in it that spells out Christmas. And then it has things in that block associated with that letter. And then a border. So I started this when it was released back in, I guess, 2014. So I just thought it was the cutest thing, loved it, and really wanted to stitch it. I chose to stitch it on this, the Petty Point fabric. And I think it's 32 count. I saw somebody in the Facebook group had chosen this fabric and I was like, I love it. That's what I want to do mine on. So I bought it. I don't know that I will stitch something else on this. Like it would depend. I think the problem with using this fabric for this piece is that there was so much in here where you have these little like snowflakes and things like that that are a little hard to see, and you kind of lose the effect of them because of the polka dots. So like the little, like the steam coming off the cocoa, you kind of lose that. So part of what held me up on this one, and the reason that it was a whip for so long, was two things. One is this gray that goes between the blocks, that is the border between the blocks. I made a note somewhere and said, instead of the called for, which I think was like 648 or something, I went one shade darker because of my fabric, and so I think I used 647. Could have been 646, 640, whatever. I basically told myself that I changed the color, but I didn't actually write down which color I changed it to. And so I've spent several years, every time I would pick this up, I would try to match my thread and figure out what the heck color this is. And I couldn't. And I don't want to rip all of it out and start over. So I was kind of playing, which gray is it? And so what I ended up doing was I literally pulled every gray DMC that I have. And I was like, we're going to figure this out once and for all. And ironically, I had my bobbin of 647, and I was like, oh, this is it. And so I stitched, with that, and got almost finished with all the gray, and then ran out. And so I went and I pulled a new skein of 647, and it was a different color. And I'm like, what the heck? So then it was kind of back to the drawing board, and I had two skeins of 647 that were both the same color, but not the color that was on this bobbin. So I don't know if I put the wrong color on this bobbin or if it was mismarked or what, but I was able to find something, I want to say it was like 3023 or something, that actually matched close enough. And I used that for the last little bit. But oh my gosh, trying to match grays is almost impossible. So that was one of the things that was holding me up. The other thing is that you can see there is this kind of lacy border that goes all the way around. And there's little reindeer in it and snowflakes and snowmen, and it's really cute. I started stitching the border, and you cannot even see it on this polka dot fabric. One is that it's just the color that you're using, which is actually a week's overdyed called Snowflake, which kind of goes from white to blue to pink, so it has some blue and pink in it as well as white. You couldn't actually see it on this fabric. And the other problem is that this fabric is so busy that you lose all of the detail of this lacy kind of border. And I was, I kept trying to figure out, what can I do? Do I change the color? Do I do it in a bright white, like a B5200? Do I do it in a green and a red and a blue? What do I do? And so I talked with some friends about it, and they were like, just leave it off. It's not going to work in another color. And if you do it in, some variation of white, you're just going to lose all the detail to it. And that is a whole lot of work to not be able to really see it. So they were like, just get you, a frame it in tight, something that's got some of that kind of lacy sort of feel to it. And just call it done. So I was like, great, I love that option. That's what we're going with. So when I picked this up, I had basically that T stitched. And so I did all the rest of the T block, and then I did the last three blocks here, the M, A, and S. And I think it turned out so cute. And I think if I put, you know, a frame on it and just frame it really tight, maybe a white frame, you know, that has some detail on it, to kind of give that look like the border, I think it'll be good. So that's the plan. And I'm happy with how this turned out. I'm so happy to have it done. And I'm thrilled that I got, you know, 2 of these long-term Christmas whips off my list, and that they are finished and ready to be framed. Can I have this? Oh, okay, just lay there. That's fine. So I'm really, really excited about that. And I finished my Christmas celebration sampler basically, I think January 6th, because I was like, I'm just gonna keep going on this because I want it done and I'm so close. I just wanna have it finished. And so I just kept going on it and got it done. And then once I finished it, I was like, okay, now I'm gonna move to my blessing sampler and try to stitch that in the month of January. So I think that I showed you I have so much stuff piled in this chair. And of course my blessing samplers on the bottom. Hopefully nothing falls. Okay. And of course I'm having to deal with this cat here. So this is in my swan bag that my friend made me with the black swan zipper pull, which of course I love. So the blessing sampler that I chose is by Heartstring Samplery, and it's called a Hope Song. And I just felt like it really was fitting as a blessing sampler because, you know, it's got the poinsettias, it's got the chickadee, and it specifically talks about winter. And it says, my heart remembers hope when the winter bird sings. And I just thought, this is perfect. And I've loved this piece since I first saw it. I think it was that homespun sampler group. I think it was an exclusive for them a couple years ago. And then I saw it at the Jingle Ball, didn't buy it. And then I saw it at the Jingle Ball again this year and I was like, I'm buying it and I'm gonna do this for my blessing sampler, because I also thought it was a good doable size. And Stitching in High Heels actually decided to use this as her blessing sampler as well. So it's been kind of fun that we're both stitching this together. Hers is finished now, mine is not. But go look at hers on Instagram, it's really pretty. So yeah, so this is what I chose for my blessing sampler. And I am stitching it on 40 count needle and flax Dolly Madison with the called for threads, which are Weeks and Classic Color Works. Very pretty. These are the 2 colors in the poinsettias, Cherry Cobbler and Tennessee Red Clay. And then that green is English Ivy. So really pretty. And in the chart, she gives you like 5 different variations of chickadees so that you can stitch the one that is in your area, which I love. So I am going to be stitching the Carolina chickadee because that's what we get here. So, so I started on the border, and that's what I've been working on. And this is my, I bought this from Lindy Stitches, I think at the Autumn Moon. Retreat. What the heck was that called? It wasn't the Midsummer, whatever. Anyway, the autumn one. Harvest Moon Hangout. I think that was it. So I bought that. I love it. And so I've been working on the border, and I went around and I did like all the cherry cobbler petals and the leaves, stems. And then I got down here and my border did not match up. So now I'm trying to figure out where my mistake is, but I've been going in and I've been putting in the second color, which is that Tennessee red clay, and kind of checking myself as I go. So I'm basically gonna kind of work my way down here, and then I'll work my way down here and see if I can figure out where my mistake is. My assumption is my mistake is somewhere in here, but who knows? So that's where I am. Obviously this border is kind of the bulk of the work. The rest of it's just words and the bird. So I think once I get the border kind of situated, the rest of it should go pretty quickly. Still hoping to finish this in January. We'll see, but I'm not going to worry about it. But I'm enjoying it, and I'm really glad that I picked this. So that is my blessing sampler. And so when I mentioned earlier that I had 14 finishes in 2025, and 4 of them were long-term whips. Obviously, Jenny Bean fell into that category. And I also mentioned that I was going to show you one of my framed pieces that I framed like right at the end of 2025. So as part of our decluttering and stuff, we came across this frame, and it was a piece that we were actually going to get rid of. It was a piece that Eric had, and at the last minute I was like, I wonder if I can repurpose that frame. And so I measured it, and then I kind of went and looked at my whips, and lo and behold, the one that I was hoping would fit in here. It's not perfect, but it was free. So, and I framed it myself. So, and my lacing's not perfect either, but we're not going to judge. So I framed my anniversaries of the heart. And so obviously it's got a little extra room down here at the top and the bottom. I don't care. It's framed and it's on the wall now so that I can actually enjoy it, which is huge. So I started this is Anniversaries of the Heart by Blackbird Designs, and I started this in 2010 and I finished it in 2019. And this was another piece that obviously this piece is all about family. And so there came a point where it was really hard for me to work on this. I'll just put it that way. The first block, I actually kind of, I put my maiden name on it. I put my 3 boys that I had at the time, Hamlet, Romeo, and Othello. I put their initials in here. So this block was me. And then I've got, you know, some other relatives, like I've got, you know, my parents, Eric's parents, our grandparents in here, our sisters are in here. There's a few blocks that, you know, kind of stand out to me. So this block right here was one of the bonus charts, and it has an alphabet on it. I didn't want to stitch the alphabet. And I remember seeing Siobhan did, she put a quote in there that I thought was really beautiful. And so what I ended up putting in here is a phrase in Italian that is actually what's engraved on the inside of our wedding rings. So I put that on there. And I love that it's on there. This block was the block for my dad and his mom. They used to celebrate their birthdays together, and his mom would bake a cake and then bake a smaller cake and put that on top. And it was kind of their little secret. And she would say, you know, it was 2 cakes in one, like one for her and one for him. And so when I stitched this block, I think right here in this cartouche, it's charted to say something like happy birthday, dear friend, or something like that. And I changed it to say 2 cakes in one. And I've got his name and her name on here and their birth years. And then this block I did for my grandmother. She loved butterflies. She used to have like a butterfly collection, and she also used to raise African violets, and so that purple with the green just reminded me of the African violets too, plus the butterfly. And so I stitched that in honor of her. And while I was working on it, so like while I was working on my dad's block, he actually passed away. I had hoped to finish it so that I could show it to him, but I didn't get it done in time. While I was stitching on my grandmother's block, my longtime mentor died. And my grandmother's birthday was in August. She and I used to kind of, you know, share birthday celebrations. I was very close with her. My mentor, I was very close to as well. And she, her birthday was in August as well. And so I actually put her initials on that block with my grandmother's block because she reminded me a lot of my grandmother. So, so I put her in that block as well because she died while I was working on it. I have Eric's block here and my mom, or my sister, actually both of our sisters, because they're both November babies, and my mom's block. And then in this final block, I have a T and an R for Tut and Ramses. So I have my previous 3 boys up here, and then Tut and Ramses in this block. So this was a whole thing. Like, it was a whole emotional roller coaster of a piece to work on in the 9 years that I worked on it, off and on. But now to have it framed and hanging on the wall, just, I can't tell you. Like, it means a lot. So I'm really, you can tell my nose is red. So that's what happens when I get a little emotional. Yeah, I can't even begin to tell you what it means to me to have that hanging on the wall now. So, all right, we're gonna talk some other whips. And so I mentioned, so I got that framed at the end of the year, and so that was one of my 6 FFOs that I did. Go me. And then I also mentioned that I started 8 things and 7 of them I finished. And the one that I did not finish is living in this portfolio with the haunted houses. And so I did leave this as something I would like to work on this year, or work on, period. This is Bones, which is one of the animal crackers by Stacy Nash. And I started this for when Tara, Sully Stitches, did her Spooky Summer Sal. I started this for that. And I worked on him a little bit, kind of off and on, I think for some Dark 13 stitching, but I didn't do a ton. So, and I'm stitching this on the called for, I think it's 35 count weeks gray, and that's where I'm at. So not a lot done, but I have my Black Cat needle minder, and yeah, I think I started him for like Friday the 13th, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe not. I may have started something else for Friday. It doesn't matter, whatever. But I started him for the Spooky Summer Sale. So one of these days, I will get back to him. And I have all of the called for threads that I put on my thread drops that I got at the moth thread drops that I got at the Midsummer Stitch from Lindy Stitches. So I love these things. So I will be keeping him out so I can work on him. Okay, I had to take a brief pause. Okay, so that was, like I said, of the 8 things that I started last year, Bones was the last remaining thing. So my plan for the winter quarter is working on my blessing sampler and hopefully finishing that. And then I had 2 other pieces that I wanted to work on. One of them is a piece that I started for my mom's birthday as a memorial sampler the year that she died. And it is the Chessie and Me Janet Reed sampler. And it is stitched in Gentle Arts wools. And so her birthday was in December. So it just, you know, stitching with the wools just feels like it's a very wintry piece. And the wools are absolutely beautiful. They've got some nice texture to them. And if you haven't stitched with these, they're a lot of fun to stitch with. You just stitch with 1 strand, but you do have to do it on a little lower count fabric. So I think I've got a 32 count, just because they're a little thicker. but they're so pretty, and you can see they're, I mean, you can tell they're wool. So, and I'm stitching this on a piece of, I think it's needle bling, and I think it's called cookie dough, if I'm not mistaken. And it does not like to show up on camera correctly. It's a little, I want to say it's almost a little pinker than this. To me, it looks like gingerbread, but it does not look quite this yellow in person. It's a little more pinky, but this is what I have done. Sorry about the wrinkles there, the fold lines. I really love it. And it had all these initials here. And so I actually like went through like my mom's side of the family and put initials of people from her side of the family, like her mom, her dad, their parents, etc. on there. And so I would like to get back to this. I'm almost down to, you know, I'm right here where the initials are. So I'm almost down to like all the fun motifs. So I would like to get back to this at some point this quarter. And the other piece that I would like to work on is a piece that I started, I don't know when. This is Birds of a Feather Happy Heart sampler, and a friend stitched this and then passed along her chart to me. So this is not one of the new reprints. This is one of the originals. But I've always loved this, and I would really like to have it stitched. As I mentioned, Eric and I celebrated our 19-year anniversary this past year, and so our 20th is this year, and I'd really like to have this stitched for that. So I'm gonna get this out and work on it. And, you know, working on it around Valentine's Day just seems kind of appropriate. So I'm using the called for weeks threads. I may have some missing, but I think that's all of them. But it feels like there might be some missing. Well, I don't know. We'll see. Oh no, there's some DMCs in here too. And I'm stitching it on a 40 count Lakeside sand dune. And this is, I haven't had this out in forever. This is where I'm at. So I kind of just started in the middle. Let's see if I can. So I've got this big flower done, which was a pain in the behind. But I would like to work on this. I think this will be a good Valentine's project to work on, I think. So that is the plan. So I have my wool wintry sampler, I have my Valentine's sampler, both of which I think will be perfect to work on this this quarter. And then I had no plans to work on this, but it was in my, at some point I'd like to work on it. But the other day I saw a post pop up that was from Tiffany and Company, and they were talking about the some of the jewelry in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, and a lot of it is scarab pieces, which made me start thinking about this piece. And so over the weekend, I was like, I'm gonna get that out. I'm gonna work on it for Dark 13 stitching. So I got this piece out, and I started this in 2016. I started it on Halloween as part of Dark 13 stitching. But I had this chart probably, this says copyright 2006, and I remember I bought it from the Silver Needle when it came out. So I probably had it for 10 years before I started it in 2016. And so this is by Dimples Designs, and it's called Mini Jewel Scarabs. And I love it so much. And doesn't it work with my nail polish? I think it does. But I absolutely love this. And I really, really, really want to have this stitched and to hang it with my moths. I love this so much. Now these Dimples Designs, if you are not familiar with them, because these are kind of old school, right? These are back from like blogging days. They're so realistic looking. And he did like ladybugs and moths and dragonflies and bumblebees and all sorts of things. But I just absolutely love the scarabs. And they're so realistic looking. They're stitched over one on 32 count with a whole butt ton of Krynic blending filament. But oh, they're so amazing when they're like done. So I started this, and it came as a kit, so it has like all of the blending filament in here, you can see on these cards, and it has all of these cards of thread in here as well. There's like 5 of these. And I think this is all DMC, is my guess. So anyway, and it came with fabric. So this is my start. Not impressive. So, but it is sparkly. So I started this in 2016. I think I worked on it one other time after that, which is when I discovered I have a mistake. So it got put away, which is usually why my whips get put away, because there's a problem or because they have a mistake. So I got this out because I really wanted to work on it. And I was like, I'm gonna figure out this mistake and then I'm gonna fix it. And the more that I looked at this, and then, you know, once I started trying to kind of dig into where the mistake was, the more I realized I don't have that much started on this. I mean, it's not that much. And I don't love this fabric. So I think I'm just gonna scrap this and start over, which means that technically this is no longer a whip. But I am going to leave it, you know, in my, I would like to work on this again in the near future bucket, because I would like to work on this in the near future. And I saw someone that had stitched this, and they did it on flax color-ish linen, flax or raw you know, natural kind of color, which I think might work better, because to me that almost looks more like, you know, like it's a specimen tray. So I may just order a new piece of fabric and get something more like that, and we'll just start over, because I think that would make me happier, and life's too short to rip out over one blending filament, right? So that's what we're gonna do. But I really think this will be so cool at some point. It's gonna take a lot, but I think it'll be really cool. So this is technically no longer a whip. This is gonna be a restart. And this piece is a whip that I have been working on and would like to continue working on. And this had been kind of my dark 13 stitching that I was doing. And it is the Greenhouse of Oddities by Lola Crow. And I don't think I don't have a picture of the whole thing, but you can get an idea. So it's this piece. So I've been working on this for dark 13 stitching, kind of off and on. Love, love, love this piece. And I am stitching it on 40 count Boston by Seraphim. And this is where I'm at. And I absolutely am completely and 100% in love with this. So much. And it's just stitched with DMC, but I just absolutely adore this piece. So I've left this in my whip basket so that I can work on it for dark 13 stitching. And then the last two pieces I have not worked on in a while, but I would like to get back to. One of them I was working on with Olivia from Pumpkin Hollow. We were working on His Eyes on the Sparrow by Heartstring Samplery, which ironically, I started in January 2015, and this was the piece that I was showing like my start on in my very first Flosstube video. And now here we are 11 years later, and it's still a whip. This is where I'm at. I'm not going to take it out of the Q-snap because that's a pain, but this is where I'm at. I'm at the bottom. You can see this bottom border. This is Adam and Eve and the tree that I'm working on. And so Olivia and I had been working on this on Sundays, and I have not worked on it in months. So I'd really like to get back to working on it on Sundays with her again, or if she's not up for it, I would at least like to work on it on Sundays, because I'd really like to get this piece finished. And I'm stitching this with the called for threads, overdyed threads on 48 count Gonder linen. So my colors are really saturated because it's on the 48 count. I love it. Love it, love it. So I'd like to get back to working on that at least once a week. And then the other piece, which was also a once a week piece, is my Shores of Hawk Run Hollow. And I had been working on this This is by Carriage House, Kathy Barrick. I had been working on this on Friday nights, and I basically have the top row complete, and now I'm working on this block. And so I would like to get back to working on this once a week. So my plan is, and I'm stitching it with the MPIs, and I'm stitching it on the called for 40 count vintage autumn gold by Lakeside. I want to finish my blessing sampler, and then I'd kind of like to start pulling this back in. So there's where I am on that block. And that's where I left it. So I'm hoping that I can get back to this sometime soon, which would be great. So there's my little mini whip parade and kind of what I plan to work on, would like to work on for the winter quarter, which, like I said, is going to go through the spring equinox, which is in March. And let's see. All right, let's talk about books. So I did my goal last year, for the Goodreads challenge, I had set a goal of 60 books. I only read 43. And it kept saying, like, on December 30th, it's like, read 14 books to catch up. No. So it's not gonna happen. Whatever. I read 43 books, it's fine. I went ahead and set my goal at 60 again this year. We'll see how I do. So I have read 3 books so far this year, and the first one I had started at the end of last year, which was The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst. She's the one that wrote The Spell Shop, which was also excellent. So if you haven't read that, highly recommend. The Enchanted Greenhouse, I think I liked better. But it takes place in winter, which is kind of perfect. But it was really, really good. Cozy fantasy, really good. And then after that, I needed to read my book for the Sampler Guild of the Rockies book club. And so we read These Tangled Threads by Sarah Loudon Thomas. And this is a book that it takes place at the Biltmore estate. And it's about a woman that's a weaver. And so it was really, really good historical fiction. Very much enjoyed this book. It was a quick read, thank goodness, because book club was on the 8th. So I needed to get on it. But it was really good. So I recommend that one. And then after that, I have threads here. Oops. After that, I decided that my book club is on the 22nd, which is next Thursday. So I should probably go ahead and read that book, so that I'm not waiting till the last minute. So for my book club, which is the Absinthe and Shadows Literary Society, which if you'd like to join, you're welcome to join. There's a link down below where you can go and do that. And we have discussions on Zoom every other month. And so this month's book is The Rainfall Market by Yu-Yong Guang. And I'm not going to talk too much about it other than to say that I really enjoyed it. I think it was a really good choice for a January New Year kind of book. And I'm really looking forward to discussing it and hearing what everybody else thinks. But I did enjoy it. It's a very short, quick read. It's a very sweet book. So that's what we're reading for next week. And so I finished that last night. And so this morning, I started a new book. And so on Christmas Day, Eric and I decided to start watching Outlander from the beginning. We had been watching it, and then when we lost Stars, all bets were off. And now that we have Stars again, I was like, I just want to start from the beginning. So we started it over, and I've so been enjoying the show, and it was making me a little bit nostalgic because it reminded me of a couple of things. One, I had a friend at the time that these books came out, like the original, few books came out, and we would gift them to each other and then, read them together, buddy read them. And so we would when the fourth book came out, we would read 1, 2, 3, and then the fourth book. And so I've reread the first few books several times. But so it reminded me of that, but also, it reminded me of when the series started, that everybody was like totally gaga over all of the hand knits and, that Claire wears. And so everybody was like in this knitting frenzy, to knit these shawls and cowls and wrist warmers and things. And it just reminded me of that. It was one of those things where I was like, this is back when Instagram used to be fun, and people had like their little, pocket Jamie that they were, taking photos of in various places. It was a little cardboard cutout of Jamie. I don't know, but it just brought such a smile to my face, and it reminded me of, simpler times, maybe. When Instagram kind of felt more like a community, where it felt like, people were sharing more, and not necessarily sharing more posts, but they were sharing more on their posts, where it was more, it felt more like, the blogging days, which I miss tremendously, because I felt like we all knew each other so much better, when we were blogging, because it was more long form and you were writing out your thoughts, and it wasn't just take a picture and do a quick, deal. I don't know. I miss that, and I got very nostalgic about it just from watching Outlander. But anyway, yeah. So what can I say? So anyway, I decided that now is probably the time when I need to reread the books, because I got stuck on book 5, I think, The Fiery Cross. I've never finished it, and then I've obviously never read the books past that. And so I want to kind of stay ahead of us watching the series. And so I'm like, all right, I need to get going. So this morning I picked up Outlander. This is my original copy that I bought way back when, in the 90s or something, when it was originally published. And I've started reading it, and I also I checked the audiobook out of the library, so I may do kind of a tandem read listen. And we'll just see how it goes. But I'm very excited to be reading this again. I've loved watching the show again, and just kind of all of those feelings and remembrances that it brings up for me. So one of these days I'd really like to get back to blogging more, because there is something about that I just really love. And I know a lot of people are going to Substack or whatever. I like to have control of my own content. So That's just me. But I miss that. I miss reading people's blogs. I miss having that connection. And it also reminded me, so there is a piece that the sampler girl designed for Outlander when the show first started, that now I really want to stitch, but I don't know if I can find it anywhere, but it's an Outlander piece. And then of course it reminded me of her blog, and, you know, back in the day when she was, you know, doing all of these like Jane Austen designs, and of course, you know, it was Jane Austen's 250th birthday back in December. And she was doing Jane Austen designs and Outlander and Downton Abbey and things like that. And it was just, I don't know, it was just cozy. It was just a whole vibe. This was back in the day when we used to have Yahoo groups. And she actually started one for Stacey Nash. And so we had a big like Stacey Nash Yahoo group / fan club. And yeah, it just, I don't know, just feeling very nostalgic. So, and missing those days of, you know, I don't know, connection, whatever. And really, when it comes down to it, that's part of why I do Flosstube and why I spend, you know, 4 hours or whatever talking to you about random nothingness, is because, you know, I love hearing about why people do the things that they do, why they stitch the things that they stitch, what it reminds them of, you know, the problems that they had with it, the challenges that they had with it, the triumphs that they had with it, you know, just all of that is interesting to me. And, you know, so that's part of why I share it with you, is because I want to have that sense of community and that sense of sharing and that sense of our love of stitching and reading and, you know, watching Outlander on TV or whatever. So that's part of why I do what I do. And after 11 years of doing Flosstube and then 20 years since I started my blog, it's, you know, that's the piece that's important to me, is making those connections and having that sense of community. And I know that there's a lot of people that feel very, you know, sort of fed up with Instagram and social media and kind of, you know, that the way that the algorithm is, you know, pushing reels and things like that. And you're just supposed to, you know, move from thing to thing to thing really quickly. And I am all about, you know, that intentional, slower, you know, long form, like even my videos are long form, kind of vibe. That's what's important to me. And I am sure that if you've been here any length of time, that is important to you too. So thank you again for watching. Thank you for subscribing and liking and recommending my channel and all of those things. I really, really appreciate it. And I'm so happy to be here and happy to be continuing to do Flosstube and connect with all of you. So tell me about your New Year's intentions. Tell me what your plans are for stitching in your start of the year. I'd love to hear it. And if you've read any good books, definitely share those with me as well, because I'm always looking for recommendations. So, and if you remember Pocket Jamie, drop me a note. So I can't be the only person that remembers this. All right. Well, thank you all for joining me. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this was a long one and I didn't even go through all of my whips. So imagine if I had. But happy stitching, happy January, happy New Year, happy Whip Parade season, and take care.